Hello, chess fans. Welcome to another edition of Chess Chat, a program designed to give you, the viewer, a better understanding and an appreciation of the wonderful world of chess. I am your host, George Merijanian, Program Director of the Wachusett Chess Club at Fitchburg State College. This club meets every Wednesday evening from 7 to 11 in room C-199 of the McKay Campus School at the college. And with me, once again, is my trusty co-host, one of the strongest and most active chess players in North Central Massachusetts, and the current Wachusett Chess Club champion, Marty Lane. Marty, welcome.
Hello, George. Nice to see you again.
It's always a pleasure seeing you, Marty, every time we do Chess Chat. And Marty, I'd like to announce to our viewers that this week, the Wachusett Chess Club is starting their club championship. The Wachusett Chess Club championship being held in two divisions. There'll be an A division, a B division. You are the defending champion.
Right.
And you're going to be joined in this round-robin tournament. It's going to go 7 weeks, 7 rounds, by a two-time Wachusett Chess Club champion, Bruce Felton of Fitchburg, who, by the way, is helps us out on Chess Chat, working in the control room, assisting our award-winning director, Darren Dame. And again, we have Bruce Felton, as I say. We have 4 players from Leominster. We have two-time club champion Larry Gladding, we have Gary Broussard, we have Ken Gurge, and Lenny Arsenault. We also have the Wachusett Chess Club champion from 1999, Jeff Lepore, who lives in Westford, but he grew up in Ashby. And then we also have Dave Kuchar of Westminster, who is our webmaster for the Wachusett Chess Club. If you click on, if you visit wachusettchess.org, you'll see the work that our webmaster Dave Kuchar has done for the club. And our cameraman Brian Bigelow will be among those who lives in Leominster. He'll be among those who are competing in the B division, a very strong division. Both divisions of the club championship are going to be very hot and heated, I can tell you. But Marty, just a little over a week ago, you were at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst.
Right. I went down there for a one-day tournament, and it was, I thought it was going to be sort of a small one-day tournament, and it was dedicated, it was called the Dr. Joseph Platz Memorial, and I used to live out in the western part of the state, and anybody who was an active player up to like when I was active in the 1970s would recognize the name of Dr. Joseph Platz. He was well known out in western Massachusetts in the Connecticut River Valley. He was a former New England champion, a master, I believe.
Yes, he was.
And I never met the gentleman, and though I did hear his name mentioned, many of the people that I played against had played him. And this tournament was in his memory, and it attracted, I think, around 30 players. Very strong field in the upper section, number of top-ranked players there. And it was to his memory, and it was a nice turnout. It was a good tournament.
Well, again, Dr. Joseph Platz is a legend in New England chess. He, again, is a multi-time New England champion, Connecticut State champion. He played, actually, in the 1948 U.S. Championship. He was that strong. And again, he was born in Germany, 1905 in Germany, but fled Nazi Germany. When Hitler came to power in 1933, he fled to Switzerland, eventually made his way to the United States, and settled in New York, where he continued his training as a doctor. He actually started in Germany, trained as a banker. He studied banking, but then switched, made a career change, and studied medicine. But he took his training and brought it over to the United States and worked at various hospitals in the New York area, lived in New York until he moved to Connecticut in 1952. But he befriended world champion Emanuel Lasker.
Right, one of the top-ranked player in the world at one.
In fact, Emanuel Lasker, who reigned for 27 years, is the only world champion ever to die while holding the title of world champion.
Right.
So they were very close friends. He would visit Lasker and his wife 3 or 4 times a week.
Right.
Yeah.
And they played training matches in the 1930s.
Yes, they did. 1939, 1940, there was he actually again training matches with Lasker.
Right.
So Platz is again one of the strongest players in the history of New England chess. Again, multi-time champion in New England, Connecticut, played in the U.S. Championship. In the game we're going to present to our viewers today, Marty, Dr. Platz played, when he was in New York, played at the Empire City Chess Club in the Bronx. And he was a multi-time champion there. And we're going to present a game that he played in 1949 against a player by the name of Reuben Klugman. And Reuben Klugman was one of the club's top players. And again, he excelled at correspondence chess. As well as being a strong over-the-board player, he was the top postal chess player in the country in 1955. And this is an interesting game that we're going to present. I hope that the reviewers find this interesting. We found it interesting when we previewed it. This is a game that Dr. Platz is white, and he opened the game with what move?
Well, he opened with the pawn on e2 to e4, which we've seen many times. It's one of the strongest and most popular opening moves. It opens up a diagonal for the white squared bishop and for the queen, as well as occupying a center square. It's a very strong opening move.
Okay. So Klugman, in his reply, played knight f6. The knight on g8 goes to f6, knight f6.
Right.
Well, I don't think we've ever presented this.
No, we've
defense.
we haven't talked about this.
What do we know about this?
Well, it goes by the name of the Alekhine defense, named after the Russian world champion Alexander Alekhine.
Yes.
And it's a strange-looking move. It attacks the e4 pawn, so white has to do something about it.
So what's the purpose? What's the idea behind?
Well, black develops his piece, and he attacks the center pawn. So white has to do something.
Right.
If he played, he could be very cautious and defend it, either with the knight to c3 or with pawn to d3. But that's a very passive way to go. That gives up all the initiative we talk about. White shouldn't always try to shape the game in the way that he would like to see it. He'd be playing in a very passive way.
Right.
So the thing he can do is he can push that pawn one square forward and turn the tables and attack that knight, which is exactly what Dr. Platz did.
Okay, so that was Dr. Platz's second move.
Right.
So yes, there was no need to defend that pawn, because why would white go on the defensive on the second move of the game when white can maintain the initiative by advancing that pawn to e5? All right, so now this knight has to move. The question is, where does this knight go to? Does it go back where it came from, to g8?
Well, if it goes back to g8, and white can simply respond d2 to d4, and that would be as if black had just given white 3 moves. So
but but what's interesting about this move, knight g8, which is not considered a good move, there is a U.S. Grandmaster, Joel Benjamin, from Brooklyn, New York, who has played this, knight g8, and therefore this retreating move is known as the Brooklyn defense. I would not recommend it to our viewers to play the Brooklyn defense. No. But again, a grandmaster maybe can get away with it. Right. But the average player would not do well playing that. So what Klugman played, I mean, he's not going to play the pawn to knight to e4 because he can get chased away. Right. Chased away. So the only square he can go, he played knight d5. That was his
he can't come out here because he'll lose it to the queen. So
exactly.
He has to, pretty much has to go there.
White controls the white diagonal, from d1 to h5. So this is the only safe square for that knight. So knight d5. All right, so it's Dr. Platz's third move coming up.
And there are a couple things white can do. He can choose to develop either knight. He can play pawn to the d2, pawn to d4. He can also, with that knight sitting out in the middle, kind of vulnerable, he can take advantage of it and attack it again by playing, which is what Dr. Platz did. He played the pawn on c2 to c4, once again attacking this knight.
Okay, so the knight has to move again. So Klugman now plays the knight to b6, knight b6. So his knight has been driven
over to the other side of the
clearly across the board here to b6. Okay, so now it's Alaska's fourth move coming up.
Well, one of the strategic ideas for any player is to try to seize the opening, control the opening, and by playing, and Dr. Platz played the pawn on d2 to d4, and now he's got complete control of the center, I should say.
So he could have done that. Yeah.
Oh, right, he could have. That would have been.
That's actually a good continuation because he has a very imposing control of the center.
Right. So what he did instead was he chose to attack the knight again by playing c2 to c4. Or
c5, yeah.
c5.
Okay, attacks the knight. Right. Well, Klugman plays the knight back to where it came from. Right. Knight d5 on his fifth move.
Right.
So he's found a very nice little hole to plant the knight. So how does Dr. Platz continue here?
Well, he's got one more way that he can attack it, and he plays the bishop on f1 to c4, and it goes by the name. This, I think, is the name. This is called the Lasker variation, or the Lasker
Right.
attack.
Yeah.
His friend, after his friend, Dr. Lasker.
Right. Again, Dr. Lasker. And the reason we found out why it was called the Lasker attack is because Emmanuel Lasker introduced this move, the two-pawn attack, the c5 followed by the bishop c4, in a simultaneous exhibition in 1921, but never played it in serious over-the-board play against other masters.
Right.
It was only against an amateur player.
In an exhibition.
They played it. So it's known as either the two pawns attack or the Lasker attack. All right, so now the knight is under attack after bishop c4. So what Klugman plays, he plays e6. So he brings it up, the pawn protects the knight, so he has a protector. So what does Lasker do now?
Okay. Well, even though Dr. Lasker only played this on one apparently minor occasion, other players have played this. There is a fair body of literature on the bishop to c4 move. But now Platz played, took the queen on d1 and played it to g4. And as far as we've been able to find out, he's the only one who ever actually played this in tournament play.
Okay. Now there's a reason why he brings the queen. He's bringing the queen out early. And again, I've always advocated to my students, do not bring your queen out early in the game. But there's a reason why it is brought out here early in this position, because what is Dr. Platz preventing black from playing?
Well, if you think about what a player wants to do, a player wants to castle, get his king to safety. He wants to develop his pieces. He's spent several moves moving his knight around. If he wanted to move that bishop on f8 in order to enable him to castle, he can only go to he could take the pawn on c5, or he could play to bishop to e7 if he wanted to. But that would leave the g7 pawn on prise, hanging, and threatening that by taking that, he would then attack the rook, which would have to move. And it would shatter black's king side, is what it would do.
Okay, so this queen move is very effective because it prevents this bishop from moving. Either take the pawn, because black's threat after e6 was to capture this pawn on c5, win it, but this stops that capture. So what the Klugman plays after queen g4, well, he wants to dissolve these pawns.
Right.
The whole idea behind the Alekhin's defense for black is to have these pawns advance as they did, and now make them targets. And what he does is immediately plays d6 to attack. He's attacking now two pawns at the same time.
He's attacking both pawns.
Right.
And neither pawn is defended.
Right.
So the exchange, white needs to decide which way does he want to exchange. Does he want to take it with the e pawn or with the c pawn? And in general, it's better to take from the wing rather than using the center pawn first. And so he plays the c pawn, take the d pawn.
Okay. So black in turn recaptures with his c pawn. Right. Certainly cannot take with the queen because that pawn is because the pawn is protected. So Klugman's move, his seventh move, is c takes d6. Right. All right, so we have a pawn exchange.
Okay, and so once again, the pawn is attacked now by the new pawn on d6.
Okay.
And white could play e takes d, but that would only play right into black's hands. He would be able to recapture with the queen, develop a piece, and he'd actually have a lot of his center problems solved. So what Dr. Platz did was he played the d2 pawn to d4, defending his e pawn, opening up a diagonal for the black squared bishop.
Right. Okay, so after d4, Klugman plays d takes e5, so he captures on e5. D takes e5 is his move.
Right.
So another pawn has been taken.
Right, and once again, white recaptures. He can only the only piece that he can recapture with is the pawn, so he plays d takes e.
Okay, so here's the position. If we can get a look at this position now as we have it, it's black's move, and black has choices here. What black could play here, and looks like a very good move, by the way, is play the queen on d8 to c7, because what is the threat by playing that?
Well, he's threatening the pawn to take the pawn with check.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, this is protected, right? Okay. So yes, so the threat is this pawn right here.
Right.
And so...
He's also threatening to play knight to b4 with a check down here.
Okay.
There's a queen to c7 poses problems for white.
So that would have been a very good move. But what Klugman played on his 9th move here, he played knight b4 immediately. So what is he threatening with this move? Knight b4 is his move. Okay.
Well, he's threatening to play knight to c7 check, forking the king and the rook on a1.
And winning the rook.
Winning the rook.
Okay.
So
it looks like this square has to be protected,
right.
The c2 square.
And the king can't move to d1 to protect that square because
the queen controls the file.
It'd be moving to check.
And what is wrong with the bishop moving back to b3,
well, now,
protecting the
now
c2?
The knight does not have to go to c7. He can now go to d3
so he can go to
check.
d3 check, forcing the king to move. And then he can...
If the king goes to f1, he takes the bishop.
And this would be the worst possible move.
Right, because it wins the queen.
Because the knight would take the f2 check.
Winning
It'd
the
be
queen.
a double check and winning the queen.
Right.
All right, so this would be horrendous.
Right, so he can't do that.
All right, so in this position, he's got to be concerned about defending that c2 square. Right. So what he plays...
Pretty much the only thing he can do that makes any sense is to play the queen to e2.
All right, so queen e2 defends the c2 square. And also, well, it's a good move. Looks like a very good move. All right, so what Klugman plays here, he now develops a new piece. He plays the knight on b8 to c6. So that's his move. Another piece, and it's important to get these pieces out as quickly as possible.
And Platz has the same idea. He's going to develop his knight on g1 to f3, preparing to castle.
All right.
Also gives extra protection to the pawn on e4.
All right. Klugman now continues with his development and plays bishop e7. Bishop f8 moves to e7. Okay.
Now, White had prepared to castle, and that's exactly what he does at this point. He castles, gets his king to safety, moves the rook a little bit more towards the center.
Okay, and Black does the same thing. He castles on his 12th move. So, and again, it puts the king in a safe place because kings are not safe if they're kept in the middle of the board. All right, so now it's White's move, Platz's move.
And keeping in keeping with the idea of developing, again, the queen side, neither the rook, the knight, or the bishop have moved yet. The players want to get their pieces out.
Right.
And so he plays to that purpose. He plays knight to c3, develops his other knight, getting his pieces out.
Okay. All right, so now Klugman is faced with a dilemma. How does he continue here? He's got a problem bishop. See this bishop on c8? Has very limited scope. It only has this one square right now. If he were to play b6 to try to develop that bishop, on b7, can't develop to a6 because White controls that whole diagonal. So what Klugman did, and I think this is a dubious move, he plays knight d4. He comes in with an attack on the queen and the knight, but of course the queen is protected that night. So what does Platz do in response to knight d4?
Well, he does. Well, first of all, he's pretty much forced to exchange it. The queen is threatened.
Right.
It serves no purpose to. There's no good place to put the queen. It doesn't serve any purpose to simply move it because after knight take, knight check, he would really want to be able to recapture with the queen. He doesn't want to open up a file in front of his king.
All right.
So he's pretty much forced to play knight take d4.
Okay.
Eliminate that problem.
And Klugman's move is simple enough. He plays queen takes d4. He recaptures. All right, so now we have these exchanges. Well, materially, it's even.
Right. Now, when you're playing a game and you see that your opponent has moved his queen out sort of into the open in the center of the board, you want to find some way to attack it, take advantage of that. So you're going to so what Platz does, he takes his rook on f1 and he plays rook to d1, forcing the queen to go somewhere.
Okay. So what Klugman does with his queen under attack, he plays the queen to c5.
Right.
So he's keeping an eye on the bishop on c4, which is defended by the queen, as well as the queen also attacking the pawn on e5, which is also defended by the queen.
Right. So in a kind of a minor way, right, the queen is a little bit overworked in that it's protecting two different pieces, and so it can't really go anywhere.
All right.
So Platz, again, looking to develop a piece and put it to some good purpose, he takes his bishop on c1, and he uses it to give a little extra defense to that pawn. So that at least frees up the queen from that worry.
Okay, so this bishop, yes, relieves the queen of having to defend the pawn on e5, and also vacates the c1 square
to be able to
bring
move
that rook over. All right, so what does Klugman do after bishop f4? Well, he's got to solve this problem bishop. So what he decides to do is play b6, moves the pawn to b6.
Right. With the
idea of actually, no doubt, probably placing the bishop on b7 along this diagonal.
Right, which would be a good diagonal. It comes right down to the king.
Yeah, okay, so what does Platz do here?
And again, black has pieces on white's side of the board, and so he wants to kick them away. So he's going to play the pawn on a2 to a3, threatening the knight. Now the knight has to go somewhere.
Right. Now let's point to our viewers why this knight. First of all, we can see the knight can never retreat to a6 because it would be lost to the bishop. The queen and the bishop actually have a double. In fact, yes, it would be lost because the bishop would take the knight. If bishop takes back, the queen would take and win the piece. And we also should point out why the knight cannot go back to c6. Because if the knight goes back to c6, is there not going to be a loss of a piece for black here?
Well, by playing the knight to c6,
yes.
You take a look at the position of the queen. The queen is out there and has very few squares to go to.
Right.
So if white were to play pawn to b4 in this position, threatening the queen, he would have to swap his knight for
to save the queen.
Pawns, to save the queen.
He would have to take, knight takes on b4, the recapture, a takes b4, and the queen would take. But he would have to give up a minor piece for 2 pawns.
Right.
So he decides not to do that. Instead, he plays knight d5. So that's Klugman's move. That's his 17th move.
Right.
So what is...
Well, now if we look at with the knight on d5, it's attacked once by the bishop, twice on second by the knight on c3, and a third time by the rook on d1. It's only defended twice, once by the queen and once by the pawn. A little simple arithmetic tells us that you can win a pawn in this situation. So he plays bishop take knight, threatening the rook on a1, so he's going to have to recapture it.
So he plays.
Has to be done with the
pawn.
So
he has to. E takes d5 is his move.
Right.
All right, so now Dr. Platz continues with...
captures with the knight takes d5, threatening the bishop on e7.
Okay. All right, so, and also the threat is bringing the rook over to c1, which would win that bishop on e7. So what he does after... what was the last move? Knight takes d5?
Takes d5.
So this bishop has to save itself. Right. He plays bishop d8.
Right.
That's it.
Because after rook to c1, then the queen would have no way to defend it, and so that would be lost.
All right, so he anticipates.
Right. Now the queen is out there by itself. He attacks it, moves the rook on a to c1, attacking the queen.
All right, so the queen scoots over to a5. Queen a5 is his move. All right, so he's over on this side.
Now he continues with his threats by playing the knight on d5 back to b4, threatening to put the knight on c6, which would create a double attack on the bishop.
And win a piece. Because this knight fork, attacking the queen and the bishop, would allow the rook to win. Yeah, this bishop would be lost. All right. So this queen is badly positioned.
Right.
So Klugman plays on his 21st move, queen a4. All right. So he stops the fork of the knight attacking the queen and the bishop at the same time.
Okay. So what we've seen is Dr. Platz has been continuously attacking the pieces, and he continues with that attack. Now he plays the queen to f3, attacking the rook on a8.
Okay. Well, there's only one square that this rook can go to save itself, and that's rook b8. So that's his move, rook b8. All right, this is rather depressing for black because the only piece he has out here is this queen, which is dancing around here to avoid losing material. All right, so now how does Dr. Platz continue here?
Now he switches to the other side of the board with another threat. He plays queen to g3, which carries the threat of playing the bishop to h6, which at the very least would win the exchange, which threatens mate. The only way to stop that would be to play g6, and he would take the rook on f8.
All right, so after queen g3, Klugman plays bishop f5. He finally gets this problem bishop out, and anticipating using that as a blocker if White's bishop were to go to
he would block the mate threat,
Okay, so now what does Platz do now?
Well, now Platz renews the threat on the rook by playing the pawn to e6, which opens up the bishop to attack the rook.
All right, so so now we have an attack on the rook, And we can't go to C8 because the rook would win it. The rook
Right.
on C1 would
Yeah.
just simply capture and win it. So there's only one square for that, although the rook could go to B7, but that seems awkward. He just goes back to A8. Rook A8 is Klugman's move.
Right.
All right, so now what are we doing?
Now Platz attacks the other rook, plays bishop to D6.
Okay. Well, this is rather interesting. Okay, rook is under attack after bishop D6. So why doesn't Klugman did not play the rook over here? Let's actually go look on this position right now. We can look at this position and see why Klugman did not play the rook to E8 to save it. Because what would happen if rook moves to E8? Would not Dr. Platz take the pawn here?
Check.
Check, forcing the king to take.
Right.
Would take king takes F7, and then would continue with a double attack with queen F3.
Attacking the bishop and the
right,
rook.
threatening queen takes F5 check, as well as winning this here. So that's why the rook did not move to E8 to save itself. So we're in this position. So what Klugman played instead was, he said, okay, I am willing to give up a rook. Yeah, this is right here on GC. What I'm willing to do, he's saying to himself, I'm willing to give up a major piece for a minor piece. So he plays the queen to E8, brings the queen all the way back to E8. Okay, so now what does Dr. Platz do?
Goes ahead and takes the rook on F8. Bishop takes on F8.
Okay, and Klugman recaptures. Queen takes F8 is his move, all right?
And now Platz plays the same double attack that we just discussed. He plays the queen to F3, attacking the bishop on F5 and the rook on A8.
Okay, so after queen F3, well, what are we doing here? Isn't this resignable?
And that's exactly what Klugman did.
He resigned here. So instead of making his 27th move, he resigned the game. And again, at that level of chess, being a piece ahead is enough.
Right. Well, he's a full rook up.
He's to be a full rook up. Actually, he's won the exchange, and now he's going to win another piece.
Right.
So he threw in the towel. He said, enough is enough. I've suffered enough. So anyway, this was a rather instructive game that Dr. Platz played, this variation of the two pawns attack, also known as the Lasker attack. This Dr. Platz Memorial that you attended, again, was organized and sponsored by the Western Massachusetts Chess Association under the leadership of a fellow named Frank Kolosinski of Springfield, who really is the driving force in Western Massachusetts chess, and also sponsored by the University of Massachusetts Chess Club, a very active club in the western part of the state. And they've got in fact, if you go to westernmasschess.org, you'll find a whole array of their tournaments they held and results and games. It's a great organization. I recommend our viewers to check out that website. So Marty, Dr. Platz had an extraordinary life. The fact that he fled Nazi Germany, made his way to this country, established himself in the medical profession. He actually, when he was attending the chess club in the Bronx, would be called away. He'd be playing in tournaments, the call would come in, Dr. Platz, a medical emergency, he would stop his game, rush out, either deliver a baby, attend to emergency situations. So he was really a phenomenal individual whose profession was medicine. He was dedicated to that profession, but he was a lover of chess, and he excelled at it. He was one of the best in New England. So Chess Chat fans, I hope you enjoyed this game that Marty and I presented to you, and I hope you join us next time for another edition of Chess Chat, where we will present you another interesting game that should be of great interest to you. Thank you.